From exhibitions, to professional art classes, to art lessons for kids, and much more. Come check out what's on at your gallery today.
Welcome back. Today I'm going to loosely paint this flower, and so I have wet the paper previous to it, and I don't know whether you can see I've drawn it too. So you don't have to draw things, but it just allows you to stay within the line, shall we say. So it is helpful. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with it wet, and I'm going to start with the Alizarin Crimson because it's kind of like a pinky color, you'll see here when I put it on, and I'm just going to kind of bring the paint down to the middle, and I'm letting it float around. Now that's more paint on there, but I'm going to put more on this one too, just up here a little bit. And what I would do with this is say, I don't paint the whole painting wet. I'll start with this as this would be kind of like an underpainting, and then from there, then I'll paint a little tighter, and so that you can get more definition with the paint. So I'll do that. So I want that to somewhat dry. See how that has really gone wonky on me? Well, it's gone wonky on me there because it's wet, and then it's being drawn over by the wetter paper. So I'm going to try to blot that up a little bit and stop the petal from having that growth on it there. So there, that's better. And I wouldn't put the center in yet. I could put maybe some yellow coloring or something in there and just let it float around. But as far as leaves around it and stuff goes, I think it would be better to wait until this is all dry. Watercolor does dry lighter, so that's just something to think about. I've got a couple of samples to show you while we're waiting for this to dry. These are mixtures of the wet and to wet. So, and this is all wet and to wet, like the forest fire behind there. So that's what I started with, is the wet and to wet there. And these trees too, the green trees too, I put them in. Any of the actual trunks of the trees, I waited until that was dry. And then these green ones here, I overpainted them onto a dry surface so you get more definition. And then the birch trees, I left until the end and you paint those in. So that's just one example of using both methods on the same picture. And I do that a lot. This one here, same thing. The background is all wet and to wet. And then the cherries were done drier so that you could get more detail with them, because you see here, like you don't get much detail. So it's okay in the back. I like things softer, so then I did it that way to make them softer. But then the cherries, I wanted them to stand out, so they do. And there's another one here. This is for you Niagara Falls people. This is Dufferin Islands. I started up here, and this is all wet into wet up here. So you can see that it's going into the background and it's kind of melting into the background, and that was the effect that I wanted, and so it worked. And then when it came down here, this is all painted on like dry paper, and you see the rocks and the wood and everything, and even the water. So now our flower, and I'm going to be impatient. I'm going to blot it up because it's not going to hurt anything. Ooh, look at that! Oh, nice texture. Look at that. It's not bad. So with the red, I'm going to start with the red. I might put some of the cadmium in too, but I'll just show you how now when I put this on, it almost stays where I want it. This is still wet down here, so it is still bleeding, and that's okay. I'll bring it down into these areas, but you see how you can get a tighter edge on it that way. And take this one. This is wet down there again. Pull this up. Now, see, I got kind of like a grainy effect over there. Watercolor is a lot of heavy mistakes. You can make a lot of mistakes with watercolor, and If you leave them alone, sometimes they turn into great things, and then you just say thank you and take all the credit for it. And then if they don't, then you just start again. But that's how it works. So these ones have bled quite a bit, but I'm going to stick to the original drawing and have that haze around them. Coming down here, and this is very loose painting. Like I'm not giving it a lot of detail, but it's getting a little bit. So into the flower like that. Now this one over here, like this. And what I would do right over here is I'm going to add a touch of blue to it. You want to be careful that it doesn't turn everything blue. But I'm going to put a shadow in here. Now that looks pretty dark, but I wash my brush out, and then I get some more red on the brush, and I can bring this into the red and just show that it's a shadow. And then if light is coming this way I'm just making this up, but so then this edge here, for instance, right there, would be shadow because it's bending over. You can show that it's bending over a little bit. This one here, you just give maybe a little bit to this edge and then a little bit up here. And this is done while it's still wet, so it bleeds into your color, like it just melts in. And then you'll find some spot that has dried on you and it's not melting anymore. So, but I wouldn't wet it again at that point. You could, I guess, you could keep it wet. Some painters, they have like spray bottles of water and they keep it going like that, and then it takes about 43 days to dry. Actually, if you're outside on a humid day, and your paper will never dry. It's just so humid that the paper just sucks up all of that moisture, and it's a little more difficult to paint that day. You're going to be painting wet into wet whether you like it or not. Also, you could put leaves coming around from your blossom. Like, depends whether it's in a vase or not, but even if it is in a vase and you've got another flower over here and they're overlapping is great because then it defines edges for you. But for instance, if I mix some green and see right here where that's kind of a white edge to the petal, I come in here with the green and then say make a leaf there. Then what it does is it defines that edge, and so there are edges that you don't necessarily have to paint, but then something like that will help them. And then, there could be another leaf coming up from here or something, And then what you can do with that is that is ultramarine blue and cadmium yellow medium. And if you let it dry, this period of drying with watercolor is kind of pain sometimes, but you have to let it dry. If you go in when it's too wet, it just goes wild on you. I'm going to get some orange on top of this yellow and just put some dots in here. Pistils and stamens or whatever they are in the flower. I'm not a real flower painter, by the way. Anybody can paint anything once they learn, and you will learn here. You'll learn a lot. So I've just got blue on the brush now. If I just come in here and just put the blue on like that and let it sit, might bleed over there, but that's okay. And then here, I'm going to darken this so it's in shadow from that petal. Coming around like this. And once you get a little gutsy with the paint, it just shows better for you. So I do the center line of that one. And then this is wet into wet, what I'm doing here right now, because the leaves are still wet, the paint is still wet. So you can wait for things to dry, or you can just jump in there and see what happens. And I'll just show you something here. I was talking about the yellow being opaque. See, if I put yellow on top of this, you see it sits on top. So, you can get that kind of accent with it, even when it's wet, because it's all it's going to do is bleed around. So I'm just going to touch it a little bit, and you get a little bit of yellow on there too. I think I put some yellow in the petals of the flower too. I'll use this light one. And this was not my intent when I started, but when you're doing things, and then everything is open for interpretation and change, and you have to keep an open mind when you're doing this, because sometimes discover things that work very well for you, and then other times you discover things that you'll never do again. I'll leave a little bit of white there. I think it's good sometimes to leave white on your painting too. You don't have everything painted in. Like that, and then put a little bit of dark, dangerously, under these, inside, right in here, just to give it a little bit of an accent. I mean, if it's dry, you can go in there and paint whatever you want, but because it's wet, then, so I get a little bit of a shadow from that, and you can imagine maybe that's sticking up a little bit, proud of the flower or something like that, but this kind of gives you an idea of what you can do. And because I've left these bleeding parts here, that's what that's called. If I mix a somewhat darker green for some of these leaves, like I could put a leaf, say, here and over there. Painting over top of that red gives me a duller green, duller leaf, but you can get rid of some of those that way. And also, I was saying, like, if you have a bouquet, you have different flowers or a bunch of flowers in the bouquet, then once they overlap and everything, then it starts to look better because this all bled. Most likely on those paintings that I showed you, there was a lot of bleeding on those ones too. Once you correct it, and it's okay, it looks pretty good. And when I say that you don't go back into it again, you can. And maybe I'll get a pattern again from the paper towel. I just want a bit of dark blue in there. And the darks, as they come into the flower, they actually look a little bit better. And I've got blue on my brush right now, so even if I dab this, and this is pretty blended, like that brown went into the orange pretty good, and so I don't mind that. I think the center of the flower looks fine. And if you need stems, then you put stems. When I do flowers, I do them a little different. I don't just like flowers sitting in a vase. I think that you need negative space in your picture, and I'm just going to give you a quick example of that. This was the end of my canvas, or the end of my paper. And then those leaves are outside of it, like they go outside of the area. And what I'm left with, I'll do this one too, or maybe put another leaf in there just to show it to you. Let's say there's another leaf right here too, just for namesake. So what you have is you have this space here, and this space here around the flower. And because these leaves, they go outside of the image, then it breaks that up, so you get interesting shapes. And if you put a stem down here with leaves and stuff too, then you'd have those shapes. And these are called negative areas. And it can be a negative area, leaving it white. When I say negative, that doesn't mean that the color gets dark or anything like that. It just means that it's a space that what you're seeing is you're seeing the alternative of an object. You're seeing what's around the object as opposed to the object. I'm gonna do more on negative space. It's a concept that sometimes it's a little tough to grab, but we'll work on that. So give this a shot if you're painting along at home. So, and this one is a tighter painting because you paint on dry paper and you have far more control of your painting. So if I start with the same color, and let's say start a petal here, have some color in it, then what I'm gonna do is try to gradate the color down into the flower, my flower, or the wash down the petal. It's not going to go anywhere because it's not going to bleed. And if I would suggest what you do is you do alternate petals if you can, like if you have the right amount of them, which I don't think I have alternate petals, but you do alternate petals, and then what this does is, if I'm doing this one, gives a chance of that one to dry. Now these little spots that I'm leaving in are quite intentional. I just do that with my painting. You wouldn't have to do it, it's up to you, but I like them because it just gives little spots of interest, like it's just a little glitter or something like that in the painting. So just something I like to do. So I did draw this, but I drew it very quickly. That's why it doesn't quite look like the other one, but it'll be fine. And you see that I added a little bit of water there. See how light it dries? Like it does dry pretty light. So, all right, so I'm going to put the center of the flower in now because I can do that. So you can paint on, like I can put other petals in, but you just have to be careful not to touch them. So if I have a petal in here, and if I put it on like this, and I have just a little light edge to it in there. And what I can make it darker later. I can put some dark in. So I don't know whether you can see it from there or not, but it's just a little white edge to it, and then pull it down into the center of the flower there. So this method is more in layers. You do layers of the paint, like painting. Whereas the wet into wet, it's more direct. You're more expressive with the painting. And it is a challenge outdoors and stuff because, like I said, sometimes it's so hot that paint dries on things immediately. And then another time the humidity isn't there. When you go outside to paint, the weather plays a big role. So now I'm going to put the leaves in, these green leaves, and I'm doing this now because I'm waiting for my flower to dry. That's the reason that I'll put these leaves in. And then I've kind of drawn a line around it where I want to show you a little bit more on how to do negative painting in this painting. So now I hope. Yeah, that's right now. So now if I'm going to go back to the alizarin again, I would stay with the same color. And if I start with the petal, and let's say there's just a little bit of an edge, a fold over here on the petal, and I can put some darker paint in there. It just kind of looks like the edge of the petal is folded over. And then I could take my paint here and do it a little opposite, like start here and come out on the petal like that. And then I'm going to wash the brush out and dry it for the most part, and then pull this paint out to this edge, so it kind of shows it's folded. That's what I'm trying to do here, that the petal is folded, and then it gets deeper into the petal again on the inside. And so this one here that I put in last, it's kind of like stuck in there, and if I darken it here and just say bring this across a little bit, and then wash the brush out and dry it. This method, it's a lot of washing and drying of your brush. And then come in here and just bring this over so like it's an edge to the flower. And I'm really using the wet with using water with this, but it's far more controlled than that one. I use water in the brush if I want to blend something and have a softer edge to it. So if I put this in like this, let's again wash the brush out. And I'm not going to put any paint in the brush, I'm just going to pull this up like this, and then it gets softer, it gets weaker. Also, as you start moving it around, like manipulating it, you got less paint on your brush, so it just gets lighter and lighter. But say something like that on that petal, and then I could come in here and paint it dark like I did on that one, and then maybe a little darkness over here. But that one I want as a cast shadow. So what you do is you have that edge there and make it a little sharper, but over here I'll put some water on it and blend this into the petal, just coming up to there. I don't want to touch that one. So it's more of a blended look, and I could get a smaller brush for this. And then it's this thirsty brush again, and I could lift this over here. This is a way of doing it where, let's say you have too much paint on it, and so you just put that thirsty brush on it again and just lift it off. And then you have a little more of a highlight on the petal. Then this one, I'm just going to make it look like it's folded over again, so I'm going to just paint a little more paint on it. I could come over here and I could get a little darker right in there and let it blend. And then this one over here might have just a bit of a shadow on that one, but I'm going to just give it a little bit of dark there, and then a little bit over here, so that's the dark side again of the leaf. I might even put some blue into this shadow, and that will show that that's more shadow there. So if I make that one a little darker like that, And the same over here. Ooh, that's nice and dark. A little darker that way. Kind of looks strange, but we'll fix it up. And then this one down here. Just gonna put some more red on it. And you see the red now, it kind of sticks to it. You're able to put it down, and if you want it there, you leave it there. It stays there for you as opposed to just bleeding everywhere. I hope I'm not talking too negatively about wet into wet painting, but I'm not a real fan. Now I'm going to put the yellow in coming up the petals here. And if I touch the red, then it's just going to bleed a little bit. It won't be a killer. Touch the red here for sure. There we go. That's kind of nice. You get some nice effects. I'll tell you, when you're doing watercolor, I have had students and they will sit there and they'll have a ball of paper towel in one hand and then they paint. And before they even know what's happened, they blot it up. I think you should still have the paper towel in one hand because if you mess up, it's good to have it there. But just check and see what the watercolor is doing for you. You can get some wonderful things that happen and you learn from that because then you learn, well, how do I do that? How do I get this? And you'll know because you've done it. So I'm just going to put the center in like that right now. And then the leaves, I'm not going to bother with making them darker. But I want to show you a bit of negative painting now. So I've got this box here. So I've cut off a segment of the flower. And I want to mix it dark. I'm going to do it dark this time. Come in here. Maybe make this really dark in the corner. And then you can kind of play with this. But this makes flowers look wonderful when you have the black background. Because then you just see the flower, you don't bother with anything around it. Now what I want to do with this, I want to keep this wash moving in this direction. So if I outline the petals or something, then I'm going to get that double paint. And maybe with the black it wouldn't show up that much, but I'd suggest not doing it anyway. And you need a lot of paint. When you mix it, you need a lot of paint to do this because it uses a lot of paint up. You wouldn't think that you'd need that much. And it's because it's absorbing a lot of this paint into the watercolor paper. So if I start here with the real dark, bring it down here. And then when I get down here, this is where the wet into wet starts. And you could bring this down and then I could just add water to this and pull it down into the bottom of the picture and just have maybe more of a watery background in here. You know, whether you have a stem going here with some more leaves and stuff, but you go around it. And especially with the stem with more leaves, and you make some of the leaves cut out of the picture too. And then that will add those areas for you, like it'll add the interest with the different areas. Now, I'm just going to do this roughly. And then I'll just fill this in. Put a little bit of a stem on it. Do a leaf here. So I kind of messed up right here. So if I just get my brush and it doesn't have any paint anymore and just lift it a little bit, you can still put a leaf over top of that and it just won't be terrible. So down here, it's just a little brushier. Now that I've done that, what I want to do is I want to add more interest to the flower. I like that idea of putting that dark around the center here. Now the orange is dry-ish, so I can go in there and just break it up a little bit and just put some shapes so that you show the center of the flower. And then on the other side, I'll get some yellow and just put yellow over here. And this is the way that the yellow will sit on top of what you painted. So I just kind of strengthen this orange a little bit here. And when it dries, it really does fade. So don't be disappointed with that. It's just the way that it works. And you'll learn how to paint to overcome that. So thinking here, what I'm going to do is like the center of these petals here coming up here. I'm just going to darken them a little bit in this area where it is dark, but a little darker, lots of paint. This is the other red. I'm using cadmium right now. Still, I'm going to drop a little dark in there. And see, when this goes all mushy like this, then I can wait until it dries and then give it more detail. If it's wet, you see I'm just putting dots when I paint, just a little dot. If you put the dot on like that, then the paint will spread for you, but it's a little more controlled. So up here, maybe just a little indication of the petal having ridges or something. With a petal, when it has ridges, it come up in like this, and then bring them down here and just curve them a little bit like that, and then that gives it some texture. And then over here, because this one is pretty strong here, all I'm going to do is put just a bit more color in there. You can saturate it if you want. You could get lots of color in there. I'm going to just melt that a little bit. And say the greens would be more pronounced too. And then I'm just going to do this. And that's good, eh? Okay, then we'll say goodbye for this one. And the next one, I'm just going to do a little painting, maybe a winter scene or something. Make it very simple, but I'll show you how to progress the painting. So that's what we're going to be doing next time. So thanks a lot for joining in, and we'll see you next time.